The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Leng. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we have a special treat. We are taking a look at the new investigator that FFG dropped yesterday. That's right, we have Gloria Goldberg, the new investigator who is coming out in the Dark Revelations Arkham Horror novella in November. I was all set to record my reviews for Point of No Return today, and then FFG surprised everyone by dropping a new investigator on us yesterday, and a mystic investigator to boot. After, as you may know, the last Arkham Horror novella centered on Dexter Drake, who was also a mystic. So we get back-to-back mystic investigators. Gloria is the encounter control deck investigator. All of her abilities and many of the cards that she will be using are focused on controlling the encounter deck. So we are going to take a look at her today and take a look at her abilities, her signature cards, as well as play around with some deck ideas for her. And then in part 2 of this video, we will be playing we're gonna put Gloria to the test and play her through. I believe it's going to be Threads of Fate. I'm going to add a few experience points to a Gloria deck, and we're going to give her a try against Threads of Fate. Normally, I'd play her against something like Untamed Wilds or one of the intro scenarios, but I've played those scenarios so often that I'm game for a change. So we are going to test Gloria against Threads of Fate. That will be coming in part 2. I hope that you will stay tuned for that. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. Special thanks to Kodab Games, the latest patron to embrace the darkness. Kodab Games produces a ton of Arkham Horror LCG content over on his channel on Twitch, and I highly recommend that you go check it out. Thank you very much, Kodab Games, for your support. It means a lot to me. The Arkham Horror LCG community is amazing, and these people have gone above and beyond to bring you content like these investigator previews. If you'd like to support the channel and see your name in lights, head over to patreon.com, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. We have a new Arkham Horror novella coming out this November, Dark Revelations by Amanda Downham. It focuses on the writer of the Arkham Horror LCG Arkham Files property line, that being Gloria Goldberg. She has been around for quite some time. I think she's been in just about every Arkham Horror product that has existed since the dawn of time. In addition to the novella, we get Arkham Horror LCG players will get her investigator card, both of her replacement signature asset and signature weakness, as well as an investigator mini card that so you can play her in your games. Now, ever since Scrying was printed in the core set, I think we've known that we were going to be getting some sort of encounter deck control investigator, and I'm not sure why, but I always sort of assumed that Gloria would be the investigator who did that. So we have her now, and she is there is a lot going on with this investigator, lots of interesting tricks now that she can pull with the encounter deck. Now, encounter deck control is one of those strategies that I think is quite potentially dangerous from a design point of view. Anytime you give players control over the cards that they get to encounter from the encounter deck, a little is okay, but a lot can really sort of end up making the encounter deck irrelevant. The designers had this sort of trouble in the Lord of the Rings LCG. They printed some cards that enabled players to interact with the encounter deck, and it didn't take long before at least one player devised a deck that basically removed the entire encounter deck from the game, making playing the game basically a cakewalk. And so they ended up having to nerf many of the cards that involved encounter deck control. Now, we haven't received a ton of cards in this game that that interact with the encounter deck. I think designer Matt Newman has been very cautious this time around about trying to find the right balance between providing some encounter deck control and not going overboard so the encounter deck basically becomes irrelevant. So that will be that's going to be the trick with Gloria. She, I think she has the potential to be quite a powerful investigator if you're able to get her encounter deck control online. But it remains to be seen whether she may tip the balance a little too far and turn encounter deck control into a dominant strategy. I have faith in designer Matt Newman that that is not the case. I think Gloria is going to be a great deal of fun to play and will be an asset in multiplayer. We'll also take a look at her potential in solo as a player who plays mostly solo. That is where my interest lies. So a lot of what I have to say here is going to be focusing from a solo perspective. Now, there are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing, and you have been warned. Now, I have got to say that we have seen many depictions of Gloria over the years, both in the Arkham Horror board game as well as Eldritch Horror. I have got to say that this is probably my favorite, if not all-time favorite depiction of Gloria. I think the art on this card is absolutely amazing, and kudos to the artist who put this together, because it is. I think it really remains true to the images of Gloria that we have seen in the past, but it really brings out sort of the aged writer. And definitely a very smart-looking card when you put it on the table. So glad to see that they invested in some new art for Gloria. This is her promo investigator, though, so we don't know what the art will be for her when she is released in a product at some point in the future. But love this art for Gloria. The art that is released with her when she comes out in a product is going to have to be pretty damn good to beat this one, and I think I'll be using this if I play Gloria in the future. Gloria Goldberg is the writer. She has 5 willpower, 4 intellect, 2 combat, and 1 agility. She is clairvoyant, and her game text is: you choose the investigator order during the mythos phase. She has the response: when you look at one or more cards from the encounter deck, look at one additional card and choose one non-elite card among them. Either discard it, put it on top of the encounter deck, or place it face down beneath Gloria Goldberg. Max 3 cards beneath her. And her Elder Sign effect is +1. Look at the top card of the encounter deck. Of course, because of her response, you can trigger that and look at the top 2. She has 5 health, which is definitely on the weaker side, and 9 sanity, which is quite is the highest you can get. So she's got the lowest health that you can get and the highest sanity that you can get. So 5 willpower is fantastic for a mystic. I don't think you can. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It is a great starting point for a mystic investigator to leverage all of those mystic assets and spells that rely on willpower to be successful. 5 is absolutely fantastic, much better than 4. It turns out 4 just doesn't quite seem like enough a lot of the time, but 5, you have absolutely no worries when you slap down cards like Shriveling or Sixth Sense or Rite of Seeking or Mists of Rillier. You are immediately above average in all of those action attempts, so that is fantastic. 5 willpower also provides considerable protection for Gloria against the machinations of the encounter deck, including common treacheries such as Rotting Remains and Frozen in Fear. If you are searching or looking at the top cards of the encounter deck with and using Gloria's response, I don't think you're going to be targeting those willpower treacheries all that often. You will have probably juicier targets to tuck away beneath Gloria where they will not be an issue, or place on top of the encounter deck, because willpower treacheries are the most common, and having 5 willpower makes her very resilient against them. It's only treacheries like things like the Arcane Barrier from the Dunwich Legacy and Visions of Future Past, Centuries of Secrets from the Circle of Undone that can really, they start off at a willpower 5 test. And so that's where Gloria is going to have to start contributing icons and or spending resources to boost her base willpower. But if she's facing common treacheries like Rotting Remains and Frozen in Fear, she shouldn't have any problem with those, and you should be able to basically focus Gloria's ability on other treacheries, as we will see. Willpower is also an important skill in some parlay actions. There are quite a few parlay actions that require willpower, so obviously Gloria is going to have a leg up on other investigators when she's chatting up NPCs in this game. And there are also some Agenda and Act cards that also test willpower. So any willpower test, Gloria is going in above average. And so that is going to make her, gives her a great deal of resilience against the encounter deck. And we haven't even started to play around with her encounter deck control mechanics. Gloria has 4 intellect, which is above average and is useful for discovering clues at all but the highest shroud locations. I think one of the reasons that she did end up with 4 intellect is that I think the Gloria Goldberg builds will focus around cards like Scrying, which take up an arcane slot. So, because she has 4 intellect, Gloria doesn't necessarily need to play mystic assets such as Rite of Seeking and Sixth Sense to discover clues. She can rely on her own intellect to do the job. The only problem with that, of course, is that if you're taking basic investigate actions, you don't really have a way of discovering additional clues. And we don't know what Gloria's deck building options are going to be, so we don't know whether she's going to be able to discover, have access to a class such as Seeker, which provides easy access to cards that allow you to discover additional clues. So if Gloria is playing a Kluver role, she may want to focus on including cards like Rite of Seeking and Sixth Sense. But she does have 4 intellect, so I think she can get away without them if you're tight for arcane slots. Now, 4 intellect, of course, is also helpful against common treacheries such as Obscuring Fog, which will raise the shroud value of locations. Gloria will certainly need to contribute some intellect skill icons or spend some resources to boost her intellect in those cases, but she's certainly doing better than an investigator with average or below average intellect. And it's also helpful against cards like False Lead from the core set that tests intellect 4, and Black Star's Rise from the Path to Carcosa that also tests intellect 4. Of course, many parlay actions also test intellect, so she does definitely have an advantage while trying to recruit Jazz in extracurricular activity, or if she's talking to Constance Dumaine in the Path to Carcosa. So certainly, as far as parlay tests go, Gloria will have has those covered. Now, Gloria does have, she has 2 very strong skills and 2, unfortunately, very weak skills. She has 2 combat and only 1 agility. Now, having 2 combat and 1 agility is not much of an issue in multiplayer, especially in 3 or 4 player games, where you sort of expect there to be some sort of guardian or off-class guardian hanging around who can deal with enemies that may appear from the encounter deck. But it is a significant problem in solo because once those enemies hit the table, they can pose a significant problem for an investigator like Gloria. I always sort of like to focus on the Yithian Observer test. As you may remember, Yithian Observer is an enemy from the core set. It has, I believe, 4 combat and 4 evade. So if your investigator is unable to, and 4 health, mind you, and if your investigator doesn't have a way to deal with a Yithian Observer, then you are going to be in deep trouble, because not only does the card like the Yithian Observer appear in beginning scenarios like extracurricular activity, pretty much every beginning scenario has an enemy like the Yithian Observer in it. So unless you are prepared to deal with an enemy like that, you could be in deep trouble. So 2 combat and 1 agility poses significant issues for enemy management, which also becomes extremely important when you only have 5 health to work with. Poor Gloria is not the type of investigator who can go toe-to-toe with an enemy for very long and survive. Now, she does have a couple of options in the enemy management department. The Mystic class at level 0 is certainly better off than the Seeker class is at level 0. She has many different combat options, including Shriveling and Spectral Razor. In the combat, if you want to deal out damage, if you want to evade enemies, you've got Mists of Rillier and Ethereal Form. There's also so those types of cards can help you a great deal. Gloria's encounter deck control mechanics, she can also target non-elite enemies, so she can either stack those beneath her or tuck them safely away at the bottom of the encounter deck where she doesn't have to encounter them. So while she does have 2 combat and 1 agility, she does have some options to deal with it. Unfortunately, I think if you end up encountering a lot of enemies, you're going to run out of shriveling charges awfully quickly, and Spectral Razor is only good against 1 enemy at a time. So I think Gloria's best bet is going to be to use her encounter deck control mechanics to keep those enemies off the table, so she doesn't have to deal with them at all. Now, common treacheries are also a problem if you've got 2 combat and 1 agility. I mean, a locked door can become an impenetrable barrier to Gloria. There's almost, it's going to be very difficult indeed for Gloria to break down a locked door with 2 combat and 1 agility. Cards like Entombed from the Forgotten Age, she's going to be stuck in that pit for a long time, taking test after test, trying to lower that difficulty low enough so she can pass it with 2 combat and 1 agility. And cards like Snakebite as well from the Forgotten Age, there's a very good chance that unless she has an ally out, that she will end up poisoned for the remainder of that campaign. So you want to make sure that if you are playing campaigns like that, you are going to need to bring some medicine along. Now, Gloria has the advantage in that she can also not only use her encounter deck control mechanics to try to tuck those treacheries someplace where they will not affect her, but she also has Ward of Protection that can cancel them outright, and she's got that 9 sanity that she can use to soak the horror from it. So Gloria is really anything that involves combat or agility, Gloria is going to want to either keep that off the table, prevent it from appearing at all in the case of treacheries and enemies, or have some way of canceling it or otherwise mitigating the effects. Because again, with only 5 health, there are quite a few treacheries that deal damage, and you do not want to be taking damage as Gloria. Not only do we have treacheries to worry about, but the Agenda and Act decks also feature several important combat and agility skill tests that are going to be very difficult for Gloria to deal with. Again, these are not treacheries, so Gloria cannot hide away from them. She is going to have to deal with these, and she simply doesn't have the combat or agility in most cases. I'm thinking of scenarios like the Essex County Express, which has a particularly tough combat and or agility skill test you can make. Undimensioned and Unseen has an agility skill test that is fairly significant. And of course, the Curtain Call, the opening scenario for the Path to Carcosa campaign, once you deal with the Man in the Pallid Mask, the whole place is either set on fire, flooded, or filled with ooze, and moving around that area requires agility skill tests. And man, with a 1 agility, Gloria is not going to be moving all that quickly. Especially in Curtain Call, where if you begin to fail those agility skill tests, you are taking not direct damage, but you are taking damage. So Gloria will definitely need to have some allies in play in order to soak that if she has to move very far, or she is not going to be able to get out of the theater. Now, there is only one parlay action that I can think of that requires either combat or agility, but it is a tough one for Gloria. It is on Nashed. One of the, in the Dream Eaters, the first scenario of the Dream Eaters campaign, Beyond the Gates of Sleep, there is a combat or agility skill parlay test in that scenario. So, and if you are playing solo, I believe it is a 3 difficulty. So again, Gloria will probably be relying on her combat there, but she will definitely need some help from skill cards and or spending resources to boost that combat up high enough to pass that test. So Gloria has the tools available to her to deal with enemies and treacheries. She can hide them away. She can cancel them with Ward of Protection, stuff like that. But if something like a Yithian Observer was to slip through before Gloria is ready for it, she is going to have a very difficult time dealing with an enemy like that. So low combat and agility does have some severe consequences for her. Now, Gloria Goldberg's, she has a couple of abilities here. The first is her passive ability. You choose the Investigator order during the Mythos phase. Now, this can be important in multiplayer, of course, if you are running some sort of encounter deck control strategy, and you want investigators to encounter the cards in a certain order. Gloria can basically choose who gets what every turn, which is absolutely fantastic. As long as she's peeked at the encounter deck and has some idea as to what's coming up, and you're able to remember all that information, Gloria can basically make sure that the Guardian gets the enemies, while she takes maybe the high willpower treacheries, and then and she can pass off the agility skill tests off to the rogues and survivors like Rita Young. So that kind of ability can be very good in multiplayer if you know what's coming. It is irrelevant in solo. There's so that ability just for a player like me, that ability is just, it's not turned on. Now, Gloria's response allows her to, this is where her encounter deck control mechanisms come into play. So when you look at one or more card from the encounter deck, you get to look at an additional card. So in most cases, say if you're using a great ally like Alyssa Graham, you get to look at 2 cards. If you're using Scrying, you get to look at 4. Then you get to choose a non-elite card among them, so you can either discard it, put it on top of the encounter deck, or place it face down beneath Gloria Goldberg, max 3 cards beneath her. So this is where you get to, you can either discard the card, so you're not going to encounter it, which is pretty good. If it happens to be a dangerous enemy, better off in the discard pile, especially if you're playing solo, where your odds of running through the encounter deck more than once are extremely slim. You can put it back on top of the encounter deck if it happens to be something that you're quite confident in passing. Something like a Rotting Remains, I would probably put that back on the encounter deck because I know Gloria has got a pretty good chance of dealing with it with her 5 willpower. Or you can place it face down beneath Gloria Goldberg, max 3 cards beneath her. This ability basically lets you just store encounter cards that you essentially never want to play again, to encounter again. There are her signature asset and her signature weakness both interact with this, but unless you are using those cards, there are no cards that interact with the cards underneath Gloria. So if you say peek at the top of the cards on the encounter deck and you see Ancient Evils, you can tuck it beneath Gloria and never worry about seeing that copy of Ancient Evils again. There are 3 copies of Ancient Evils in the encounter set. So theoretically, if you get the right draw or peek, if you peek at the top of the encounter deck and you see all 3 copies during a game, you could tuck all 3 of them beneath Gloria and never have to worry about adding that additional doom. 1 doom, much less 3. So that's a nice ability to have. If there's a non-elite enemy that you are particularly worried about, it can go underneath Gloria. You never have to worry about it again. Or if there is a very bad treachery. Some encounter sets feature 1 copy of a treachery that can be particularly nasty. I'm thinking of, I believe it's Serpent's Call from the Forgotten Age, where you have to draw multiple encounter cards. You might want to tuck something like that away underneath Gloria so you never have to worry about it again, unless, of course, you draw her signature weakness, that we will look at in a moment. Now, it's important to note here that Gloria's encounter deck control mechanics basically require another card to turn on. She does not have a native way of looking at the top card of the encounter deck. Her card doesn't allow her to do that. So she needs another card in order to do that, which I guess is very fitting for a Mystic Investigator. Mystics always seem to require enablers to let them fight, investigate, or evade. And in this case, Gloria needs an enabler in order to trigger her encounter deck control mechanisms. If you do not have that enabler either on the table or in your hand, Gloria is basically blank. So she's a 5 willpower investigator. So you are going to need to pack your deck with cards that enable you to look at the encounter deck if you want to use her ability. Excuse me. There's really no choice because Gloria can't do it on her own. Now there are actually relatively few cards that look at the top card of the encounter deck. As I mentioned at the top, designer Matt Newman has been pretty careful in allowing that in using that sort of ability on cards. So Gloria doesn't have that many to choose from, to be honest. So those cards are probably going to make the cut in her deck, depending on the deck building options. We'll take a look at those cards here in a moment. Now, Gloria's Elder Sign effect is +1, which is fairly weak. I mean, +1 is not going to be... usually you want to be 2 up before you pull from the Chaos Bag, and if you are, say, even before your skill test modified skill value is equal to the skill test difficulty, you usually want to be 2 up before the pull. So +1 is it's going to help you sometimes, but it's not overly powerful. And the other trick is that you get to look at the top card of the encounter deck. Now, this is an ability that Gloria has to look at the encounter deck herself, but it is an Elder Sign effect, so I don't really consider it the same as, say, if she had a response that said, look at the top card of the encounter deck. It's nice that she has the option, and you can trigger her response if you draw an Elder Sign to look at the top 2 cards of the encounter deck and deal with them as you see fit. But Elder Sign effects are simply too inconsistent to really build a deck around. So if you build a deck and hope that you're going to draw enough Elder Signs in order just to be able to trigger Gloria's ability enough to get a good lock on the encounter deck, I don't think that's going to work. You're going to definitely need to include other cards. So it'll be nice if it happens. It's always nice if you draw an Elder Sign and are able to trigger that effect, but it's just not something you can count on. So while it does give Gloria a way to interact with the encounter deck, it's going to happen fairly rarely, and in some scenarios, it's not going to happen at all. So unless if you get very unlucky. So that is something to consider when you are building her deck. Gloria's her signature asset, her replacement asset is Ruth Westmacott, Dark Revelations. She's a 3-cost asset with 2 intellect skill icons and a wild skill icon. So if you don't happen to need Ruth's abilities, you can always commit her to a skill test for 3 intellect skill icons, which works quite nicely with Gloria's 4 intellect. She has the ally and artist traits, Gloria Goldberg deck only, and she has the replacement keyword. And she has the response, when an investigator fights, attempts to evade, or initiates a skill test on an encounter card, discard an encounter card that shares a trait with that encounter card from beneath Gloria Goldberg. Reduce the difficulty of this skill test by 2. And Ruth has 2 health and 3 sanity and takes up an ally slot. Now, Ruth is the only card that enables Gloria to leverage the encounter cards that you placed face down beneath her when you trigger her response. So ideally, you're going to be looking for cards that have, if you want to be able to really leverage this, leverage Ruth, you're going to want to have cards with common traits on them in order to do that. The other thing to note about Ruth is that you can trigger her response in multiplayer to assist any investigator regardless of their location. So she's kind of like Min's ability, or was it analytical mind? Min's ability to contribute skill icons to investigators at other locations. Gloria can sort of pull off the same trick with Ruth. So if Gloria is on one side of the map and an investigator is on the other side, Gloria can still lend a hand to that investigator as long as she has an encounter card stacked underneath her with a trait that shares a trait with the encounter card that investigator drew. And that includes if you're fighting enemies or dealing with treacheries that you've drawn off the top of the deck. Now, I think the important difference between an ability like Min's and this one is that reducing the difficulty of the skill test is often better than providing a bonus to an investigator's base skill value, especially if you're able to reduce the difficulty of the skill test to 0, since the only way you can fail that type of test is if you draw the auto-fail token. And reducing the difficulty by a skill test by 2 is pretty good. So if, say, an investigator is looking to fight a particularly weak enemy, or evade a weak enemy, or initiates a skill test on an encounter card, it's not going to work with a card like Rotting Remains or Frozen in Fear, since you were only lowering the skill difficulty to 1. But I think there are some cards in the game with skill tests that have a 2 difficulty, so you can lower that and hopefully get some value for Ruth. Now, Ruth has 2 health, which makes her resilient to some of the ally hate cards that are out there in the game. I'm thinking here of cards such as Claws of Steam from the Essex County Express and Centuries of Secrets from the Circle Undone that will deal direct damage to your allies. She does have 2 health, so she can afford to take a hit from that, and she won't die. Her 2 health is also quite helpful for Gloria, since Gloria only has 5 health to begin with. So having cards like allies and new mystic cards like the Robes of Endless Night will certainly help Gloria soak some of that damage that is incoming. Now, the big drawback, I think, of Ruth is that she competes with Alyssa Graham for the ally slot. Alyssa Graham is basically Gloria's best friend and probably one of the best cards in a Gloria deck, and but Alyssa takes up the ally slot. So unless you have a card, unless you pick up Charisma for 3 experience points, Ruth and Alyssa are going to compete for that slot. Personally, I think Alyssa is much better simply because you can trigger her ability every turn as a free triggered ability. So that is extremely powerful. That can give Gloria a lot of control over what's coming up out of the encounter deck, while Ruth is more of a, once you have stacked a few cards underneath Gloria, then you can start to leverage the traits on those cards to manipulate skill tests. So I think early on in a game, you definitely want to be playing Alyssa, and then maybe drop Ruth once you've got some cards stacked under Gloria to use those to leverage those traits. Again, you're going to have to pay attention to what the traits are on those cards so you can get the most value out of them. This, of course, is Gloria's replacement card. We don't know what when she is officially released in a deluxe expansion, what her cards will be. We haven't seen her backside yet. So I'm hoping it's not an ally because I really want to. Personally, I think Alyssa is just such a powerhouse. Is going to be such a powerhouse in a Gloria deck that competing with that ally slot is not where I want to be having to worry about as I'm building a deck. Now, Gloria's signature weakness, Liber Omnium Finium, is a weakness, of course. It has the End Times trait, Gloria Goldberg deck only, replacement, Revelation, draw a random non-weakness encounter card from beneath Gloria Goldberg. That card gains peril, its effects cannot be cancelled, and you get -2 to all skills while resolving its effects. If that card is an enemy, it immediately attacks you. If no card is drawn by this effect, shuffle this card back into your deck. So this is, it's difficult to judge how dangerous this particular card is because it depends a lot on the cards that you have stacked underneath Gloria, and it depends a lot on, because it targets a random card, it's going to be tough to know ahead of time what this card is going to do to you. Now, if you have stacked cards like Ancient Evils or Locked Door under Gloria, Ancient Evils will simply trigger. You will just add a Doom in play. So you're basically stacking an Ancient Evils underneath Gloria. You will draw your signature weakness. You're essentially delaying when that Doom hits the table, rather than it hitting the table right away, which might be bad. You may not want the agenda deck to advance quite yet. You can tuck that away under Gloria, and then this weakness will make that pop later. Locked Door, it will simply get, maybe Gloria has a couple of high, a location with a lot of clues on it. That's the only location on the table. She doesn't want to lock herself out of it because it's going to be very difficult for her to deal with her low combat and agility. She can tuck it under herself if she gets to control it before it pops. And then this card would come along and trigger the Locked Door, at which point there may be no good targets for it, which would be awesome. There may be all the clues have been snapped up, so it can just go on any old location, no effect. So it is entirely possible that this card will whiff entirely, and it will simply do nothing. So that is any weakness that has the potential to do absolutely nothing is okay in my book. Now, if you start to stack combat and or agility based treacheries beneath Gloria, then things get a little more frightening. Especially because of the text on Liber Omnium Finium. It gains peril, so no other investigator can help you. It gains cannot be cancelled, so Gloria has you cannot play Ward of Protection, although you could play Deny Existence to say if a combat or agility based treachery dealt damage to you, you could play Deny Existence to prevent that damage. You just couldn't cancel it ahead of time. And her modified combat and agility skill value is going to be 0 or less than 0, and that's just not a good position to be in. So I think you've got to take some care. I mean, Gloria doesn't really have a good way. I mean, she can't pass combat and agility treacheries in the first place. If she can't ward it, if she can't hide it beneath the encounter deck, if she can't discard it, I think then you might want to consider tucking it under her, but you have to do that with the knowledge that if this weakness pops, it has the potential to come back and really bite you in the ass. Finally, if you have an enemy stacked underneath Gloria, it will attack her at least once because that attack is immediate, and then possibly twice before Gloria can react to it, depending on when this weakness pops. Obviously, if it pops during the upkeep phase, Gloria will simply be attacked once, and then hopefully the next turn she has some way to react to it, either by passing it off to another player in multiplayer, or shriveling it, or evading it with Mists of Rillier. However, if she happens to draw this weakness as she is, say she draws a card during her turn, and this thing pops and pulls an enemy out from under her, she's getting attacked at least once and possibly again during the enemy phase. So I think, again, like the combat and agility treacheries, you need to be very careful about which enemies you decide to tuck underneath Gloria, because if one of those gets pulled, you need to be able to one, weather that attack, because that could kill you outright if you're in a vulnerable position, and then have some way to deal with that enemy once it hits the table. Because, again, if you have an enemy like the Yithian Observer, it would be great to tuck that away under Gloria, but if you pull that at the wrong time and you have no way to deal with it, it's pretty much game over. So, especially because she has so little health to play around with. So that is, those are her signature assets and weaknesses. Overall, I think I think Ruth is a little more. Ruth is going to be harder to play because it all depends on the traits, and the traits both under Gloria and on the cards she draws, or the cards that other investigators on the table draw. So she's going to be harder to trigger her response consistently. So that's why I think definitely Alyssa, I would definitely play Alyssa over her most of the time. As for the weakness, it does have the potential to whiff entirely, which is pretty good. Or at least it will have no effect on Gloria. Cards like Ancient Evils will still trigger, of course, but I don't mind delaying that effect and then triggering it later versus taking a ton of damage. But as for... and of course, if there are no cards underneath Gloria, this thing just gets shuffled back into your deck. So you have the potential to draw it again, and that'll just ruin a draw during the upkeep phase, perhaps delay getting some of the tools that you need. So it is annoying in that respect that it will be reshuffled, but it's hard to judge. I mean, it could do very little, or it could put Gloria, quite a hole for Gloria to get out of. So that will, I think, savvy players who are able to pick and choose the right treacheries and enemies to tuck under Gloria will be able to handle this thing. If you sort of get stuck in a catch-22, though, you may end up regretting it down the road. Gloria's deck building options. We have not seen the backside of Gloria's investigator card, so we have no idea what her deck building options are at this time. It's probably unlikely that we will find out before the novella is released. Depending on when it comes out in the world, I'm sure somebody will spoil the backside before I get my hands on it. I think to speculate a little bit about what those deck building options could be, there are relatively few cards in the other classes that can interact with Gloria's response. We'll take a look at some of those cards in a moment, but there just aren't that many cards in other classes that deal with the encounter deck. So I find it really difficult to judge whether she will be able to dip into other classes just based on encounter deck control. There is no class that immediately jumps out at you. So that's one thing to consider. Now, her ability might include some type of cards, some type of effect similar to Carolyn Fern. As you may remember, Carolyn's deck building options include cards that heal. Basically, just any card that heals horror is fair game for her deck. Now, perhaps Gloria will have a similar effect where it is any card that looks at the encounter deck, Gloria will be able to take. The wording on the cards isn't always consistent, so I think it would have to be cards that look at the encounter deck, quote unquote, look at the encounter deck, might be in her wheelhouse. Now, Gloria may also include, I think she might include some sort of seeker elements, largely because some of the cards that are available to Gloria use secrets, and secrets are most of the cards that add additional secrets to cards are seekers. The other reason I think she might have some sort of seeker access is because she does have the 4 intellect, but she doesn't really have a good way of leveraging that. There aren't many cards in the Mystic card pool that really allow her to leverage that intellect or discover additional clues. So if you want to play Gloria as a Kluver type build, you're going to need cards like Rite of Seeking and some of the newer cards that help you discover additional clues in order to play her that way. So having access to a card like Deduction or some of the other Seeker cards would be helpful, but I suspect she's not going to have access to the entire Seeker card pool. I think she may have maybe a limited number that she's able to include in her deck. I think like Carolyn was allowed to have 15 Seeker or Mystic cards, so maybe Gloria will be 15 Seeker and Survivor cards. I highly doubt that she will have any access to Guardian or Rogue. That's clearly not what a writer is about, unless maybe she writes hunting stories, in which case Guardian would be perfectly acceptable, or she writes crime novels. Maybe Rogue. Who knows? Maybe she could be a Rogue, but I suspect that she's probably some type of Seeker and or Survivor. But it just seems like Survivor has been. There are so many investigators that can access the Survivor card pool that I think Gloria will be probably a little more limited. But at this time, we simply don't know. Now, we are going to play Threads of Fate in Part 2, and I have simply built a all Mystic deck, basically. So there are a ton of great cards in the Mystic card pool already, so you can build a deck around Gloria quite easily. Without including cards from any other classes, which is another reason I sort of think she's going to have very limited access, if any access at all, to other classes, simply because she seems to have all the tools that she needs in the Mystic class already, so dipping into other classes isn't really necessary. It would be nice to have some sort of ability to generate secrets, because some of her cards deal with that, but other than that, she doesn't really seem to need access to a lot of cards in other classes. Speaking of cards in other classes, here are just a few of them. I did a search for cards that look at the encounter deck in Arkham DB and pulled up a bunch. You Owe Me One does not count, actually. It has the word look at in it, but it is in another investigator's hand, so doesn't matter. Alyssa Graham is the big one, Speaker to the Dead. She can look at the top card of the encounter deck, which is exactly what you want Gloria to be doing as often as possible. First Watch from the Search for Kadath lets you look at the cards from the encounter deck and distribute them as you wish, but Gloria already has that ability basically built into her card in multiplayer, so I don't think she'll be able to take First Watch. We have Parallel Fates, which is a new event from the Jacqueline Fine starter deck product that was recently released. She can use Scroll of Secrets, the Seeker or Mystic version, that was released in the Secret Name. I assume that she will be able to use the level 3 Mystic version of Scroll of Secrets. The big question is whether she will be able to use the level 3 Seeker version of it, because the Seeker version is, I think, much more powerful for Gloria. Finally, of course, we have the card that basically told us from the very beginning that we were going to see an investigator like Gloria, that being Scrying from the core set and Scrying 3, the upgrade from the Pallid Mask. We're going to take a look at some of these cards here to see what they do. Alyssa Graham, of course, is really a match made in heaven for Gloria. She gives you that passive +1 intellect bonus that will boost Gloria's intellect from a 4 to a 5, which, 4 is good. 5 is even better. It turns those 3 shroud locations into, you can investigate three shroud locations basically without chipping in with extra skill cards and or resources, and you will succeed most of the time. This willpower boost will also help Gloria conserve arcane slots. Each investigator only gets 2, and I think the Gloria builds assume that you're going to be playing some version of Scrying, which takes up one of those slots immediately. Now, you can play Sign Magic to give yourself an extra slot, but I have my doubts about that card. I think it's probably, certainly from a solo player's perspective, I think it's just too slow. So having a card like Alyssa that lets you boosts your intellect so you can save that arcane slot for something like a Shriveling or a Mists of Rillier is quite beneficial. Now, when you trigger Alyssa's free triggered ability, you can also trigger Gloria's Response to look at the top 2 cards of the encounter deck as a free triggered ability. Then you get to either discard one of those cards, place it on top of the encounter deck, or place it face down beneath Gloria. So that's her response. Then you also have the option of using Alyssa's the other part of her free triggered ability, which allows you to add 1 Doom to her to place the card at the bottom of the encounter deck. So basically you get to, if you've got Alyssa in play, you can look at 2 cards, and then theoretically you could place both of them beneath the encounter deck. You could, if you're willing to spend a Doom, you could discard one of them and just leave the other one on top of the encounter deck to encounter. You could tuck one beneath Gloria and put the other one beneath the encounter deck if you want to take a Doom. So you've got a lot of different options at your disposal to deal with those cards. Now, of course, the downside of Alyssa is that she conflicts with Gloria's replacement signature asset, Ruth Westmacott, as well as other Mystic allies such as Arcane Initiate and David Renfield. Arcane Initiate is fundamental in a lot of Mystic decks because it's really it's an easy source of draw to be able to get those spell assets and events and get them on the table, because Mystics can't really do a whole lot, most of them, unless they get their enablers on the table. So a card like Arcane Initiate can be very important in that respect. If you're playing Alyssa, you're giving up that draw, which I think is pretty significant. Perhaps Gloria will need to look at a card like Scroll of Prophecies from the, I believe it's a Search for Kadath, in order to replace that draw that she's missing from Arcane Initiate. The scroll takes up another hand slot, so between the Scroll of Secrets and the Scroll of Prophecies, Gloria would have her hands full. Again, David Renfield, amazing ally for generating resources in order to pay for all of these expensive Mystic assets. If you're playing Alyssa, you are not only paying for resources, which is a significant chunk of change, but you are also giving up that resource generation. So there are pros and cons to playing Alyssa. I got to think that most Gloria decks will end up playing Alyssa in the end. And just because that free triggered ability to look at the top card of the encounter deck every turn is huge. That's exactly what you want Gloria to be doing, and Alyssa is really the only card that lets her do that as a free triggered ability. The other potential problem with Alyssa is that she only has 1 health, so she is somewhat vulnerable to asset hate. Certainly, in a scenario like in the Forgotten Age campaign, where you've got Snakebite and some of those Snakebite, Alyssa is going down to that, which is going to make it that much harder for Gloria to control the rest of the encounter deck, because Snakebite will take out Alyssa in quite easily, and then Gloria will have to figure out another way to control the encounter deck. So she's not an all-in-one. She's not the panacea that Gloria needs. I think Gloria is going to need a couple of different ways to control the encounter deck, just in case one like Alyssa happens to go down to an untimely treachery or attack by an enemy. Of course, we have Scrying, the 1-cost asset from the core set. It uses 3 charges. As an action, you can exhaust Scrying and spend 1 charge. Look at the top 3 cards of any investigator's deck or the encounter deck. Return them to the top of that deck in any order. Of course, we are focused on encounter deck control with Gloria, so more often than not, you are going to be using Scrying to look at the top 3 cards of the encounter deck. 4 if you trigger Gloria's response. And then again, you have the option of you get to look at those 4 cards, and then you can discard 1, place 1 on top of the encounter deck, which you probably wouldn't do if you're doing Scrying, since you're going to return them all to the top of the encounter deck anyway. And then, or you can place 1 of those cards beneath Gloria. And then the rest of Scrying's ability will trigger, and you replace the other 3 cards on the encounter deck in any order. Now, the problem with Scrying, which has been a problem since the core set, is that it requires an action to play and an action to trigger. That adds up over the course of a scenario. I'm not a big fan of cards that require an action to trigger. But I think in Gloria's case, besides Alyssa and Parallel Fates, she's going to be have to use some of her actions in order to control the encounter deck. I don't think there's really any way that she can get around that. So I'm not a big fan of the action trigger. Of course, the upgraded version of Scrying, which we'll look at in a second, fixes that problem. So yeah, if you're playing Gloria, 2 copies of Arcane Research will allow you to upgrade from Scrying 1 to Scrying 3 for 2 experience points. So, for 1 experience point. Sorry, if you're playing 2 copies of Arcane Research, you can upgrade both copies of Scrying to Scrying 3 for 2 experience points, which is pretty good deal. The other potential problem with Scrying is it only has 3 charges. I talk about this in my upcoming reviews of the Point of No Return. It's been a constant problem basically since the core set dropped, that adding charges to Mystic assets usually takes a lot of work. So cards like Enraptured works, I think, particularly well in Gloria because she has the intellect, that base intellect of 4, to be able to pass a skill test with it. Or you can go for Recharge 2, Recharge 4, which came out in the Jacqueline Fine and starter deck, and of course the new kid on the block, Twyla Catherine Price, who can basically keep Scrying online an entire game. So again, if you've got Twyla, you would exhaust Scrying, spend a charge, and then exhaust Twyla to add a charge, so your Scrying will never tick down for an entire scenario. That's awesome, but again, Twyla is competing for that ally slot, and so far we have a lot of allies that Gloria wants to play. So I think charisma is going to be something that Gloria will be picking up very quickly. And finally, the other potential downside of Scrying is that it takes up one of the 2 arcane slots. So you're going to have to, if you are playing Scrying, and I think most Gloria decks will, you are going to need to decide whether what you're going to give up, whether you want to play a more offensive-minded Gloria and go for Shriveling and Spectral Razor, or if you want to go a more evasion-based Gloria and focus on Mists of Rillier and Ethereal Form. Those are, or you can, your other option is just to go for Gusto. Or you have to choose whether you want to play Rite of Seeking or Sixth Sense. That seems less necessary because of Gloria's high intellect. Or you have the option of playing Sign Magic to exchange some of your hand slots for arcane slots. Now, this is potentially problematic in Gloria because she is going to be using her hand slots for cards like Scroll of Secrets if you go that route, and Scroll of Prophecies if you want to be able to draw quickly. So I think Sign Magic is really going to... I probably wouldn't play it in solo because I think it's too slow, and I think there are enough tools in the Mystic Toolbox now that you can work around just having the 2 arcane slots. But some players may want to go that route and have 3, just so they have that added flexibility. Of course, Scrying 3 is a superior upgrade to Scrying. You can upgrade it quite easily, especially if you're packing 2 copies of Arcane Research from Threads of Fate. You take that 2 mental trauma, and you can upgrade it quite easily for 1 experience point after each scenario of a campaign. So at the end of scenario 2, you should have both copies of Scrying upgraded to 3, and you've only spent 2 experience points to do it. Now, it exchanges the action for the free triggered ability, which is awesome. And so now, basically, you can trigger Scrying as a free triggered ability during any player window rather than as an action on your turn. You do not need to use Scrying during your turn. You can use it during another player's turn. You can use it during player windows in the Mythos phase, the enemy phase, the upkeep phase. So that gives you a great deal of flexibility. You don't have to use it on your turn. Of course, you also have the option of triggering Gloria's Response to look at 4 cards, and the only real downside here is that you do have the potential to take 1 horror if you reveal a card with the Terror or Omen trait. Now, this, of course, depends a lot on the scenarios that you're playing and whether the encounter card sets have this trait. Some campaigns are going to be worse than others for this. I didn't take a look at what cards have the Terror or Omen traits, but this is, you're probably going to end up taking some horror at some point, but again, Gloria taking 1 horror is not a big deal just because she already has 9 sanity, and all of her allies have a ton of sanity to boot as well, whether you're playing Alyssa with 3 or I believe even Ruth has 3 as well. So lots of places to dump that horror should you get unlucky and see a Terror or Omen card. And if they're really causing problems, you can just stick them beneath Gloria and never have to worry about them again. Another interesting option for Gloria is the Scroll of Secrets from the Secret Name. That is the Seeker/Mystic card. You can trigger Gloria's Response when you use this thing to look at the bottom 2 cards of the encounter deck. Now, looking at the bottom 2 cards isn't quite as useful as looking at the top, but it uses 3 secrets, so you can do this 3 times. You look at the bottom card. Again, you have the choice of Investigator deck or Encounter deck. We're focusing on the Encounter deck as Gloria. And then you have the choice. You can actually deal with both of those cards if you trigger Gloria's Response. You can discard one of the cards, place it on top of the Encounter deck, or place it face down beneath Gloria. And then you can also trigger the Scroll of Secrets, so you can discard one of those cards or place it on top of the or bottom of the encounter deck. So say you take the action to trigger Scroll of Secrets, you draw 2 cards, you've got the option to discard both of them. You can place both of them on top of the encounter deck if you like those better than what you saw on top of the encounter deck. Or you can tuck one of them beneath Gloria and deal with the other card as you see fit. Now, again, Scroll of Secrets is somewhat problematic because it does take an action to trigger. So if you have this out with scrying, you could potentially chew up a lot of actions every turn by triggering the scroll and or scrying. But I think you are going to need to play a couple of different sources of a couple of different ways to trigger Gloria's encounter deck control mechanics. So Scroll of Secrets is a cheap way to do that. It only costs a resource, and it does take up a hand slot, which doesn't really matter for Mystics unless you're. I think it would matter in a different build. I don't think it necessarily matters in a Gloria deck. Now, the other issue with the scroll is it does only have 3 secrets, and I believe Enraptured is the only card that can add secrets to it. So that makes me think that Gloria's deck building options will include some Seeker cards simply so she can take cards like Truth from Fiction, which allows her to add secrets, or the new the Eldritch Sophist that was spoiled in Into Deep, that allows you to move your secrets around from assets, allows you to move your charges and secrets around from assets, and he also enters play with 3 secrets, so you can dump those on the Scroll of Secrets if necessary. So we won't know that, though, until we see what her deck building options are. But I think it would make sense for her to have some sort of Seeker element to her so she can access all that secret tech. Now, we come to a very interesting situation with the upgrades for Scroll of Secrets, both of which come from For the Greater Good. The upgrades, there is a Seeker upgrade and a Mystic upgrade. Both cost the same. The Seeker upgrade comes with 2 Intellect skill icons, while the Mystic one comes with a Willpower and an Intellect. Both have the item and tome traits. The Seeker version uses 3 secrets, while the Mystic version uses 4. Now, I think of these two, the Seeker version is amazing for Gloria. You can exhaust it and spend a secret to look at the bottom 3 cards of the Investigator's deck or the Encounter deck. So again, that's 4 cards with Gloria's response. You get to discard one of those cards immediately. So you look at the bottom 4, you discard 1, then you can deal with the other 3. One of which you could add to your hand, but we can't do that because they're encounter cards we're primarily concerned with here. And then you can place the rest of those cards either on the top or bottom of their decks in any order. So you get to take those 3 cards. You get 4 cards. You discard 1, so you've got 3. And then of those 3, you can trigger Gloria's response to discard one of them, put it on top of the deck, or tuck it underneath her. And then you get to take the rest of those cards and put them either on the top or bottom of the deck. I think this is a fantastic card for Gloria. The question is, will she be able to take it? Because it's a 3-cost Seeker asset, and generally investigators with that can dip into other classes top out at 2 experience points, and sometimes even 1. So I'm not entirely sure that Gloria will be able to take this card unless her deck building instructions include that text I mentioned, the look at text, so she can take a card like this. Because it seems like it was designed with her in mind and would be a fabulous addition to her deck. The Mystic version is actually quite disappointing, I think, for Gloria. You can exhaust it and spend a secret. You can look at the top or bottom card of an Investigator's deck or the Encounter deck. Again, you trigger Gloria's response to look at 2. And then you either discard that card, add it to the owner's hand, place it at the bottom of its deck, or place it on top of the deck. So for some reason, you only get to look at... With the Seeker version, you get to look at 4 cards. With the Mystic version, you get to look at 2. So, and the Seeker version seems to give you a lot more control over what you do with them. So, I don't see a reason to play the Mystic version. Maybe I'm missing something, but the Seeker version definitely seems superior for Gloria builds. So we shall, I guess we'll just have to wait and see whether she can actually use the upgraded version or not. But of the two, definitely take the Seeker one. Finally, we have Parallel Fates, which was an event released in the Jacqueline Fine's starter deck. I remember when I looked at this card the first time, it was just like, okay, it's an encounter deck control card. It'll be good when we get an investigator who focuses on encounter deck control. And lo and behold, we get Gloria the very next week. And I think Parallel Fates is going to make the cut in a lot of Gloria decks simply because it is a free event that enables her to control the encounter deck without playing any assets first. So cards like Scrying and Scroll of Secrets, you have to play them on the end, Alyssa Graham for that matter, you've got to play them on the table before you can actually trigger them. With a card like Parallel Fates, if you get this in your opening hand, you can play it right away, first action, first turn, and Gloria can just basically grab the encounter deck by the balls and manipulate it to, if you're playing solo, you get to look at the top 5 cards of the encounter deck. So you could theoretically rig the first 5 Mythos draws during the Mythos phase quite easily with Gloria's response. And you could, you get to look at the top 5. You could put one of those cards beneath Gloria, so you don't have to deal with it. And then you could put the other 4 on top in any order, so you know the next 4 encounter card draws during the Mythos phase. You could discard one of them and do the same thing. So I think this is excuse me. I've talked for. There we go. Oh. Dear. I'm losing my voice here. That's unusual. So, yeah. Gloria with Parallel Fates is extremely powerful. First turn play, I think. If you can get this down, Gloria can use this. If she doesn't have any assets on the table, it's a great way to get her to kick off her encounter deck control mechanics. Now, there is a hitch with this card, and that is that you have to reveal a random token from the Chaos Bag. And if it has one of the special symbols, you have to shuffle all the cards into the encounter deck. So you would trigger Gloria's response. You could tuck one of those cards beneath her. You could discard one of those cards. And then you could place them all in any order on top of the deck, but then you would have to deal with this random encounter random token from the Chaos Bag, which could mean you just have to shuffle all those cards back into the encounter deck and basically waste an action. So as much as I like Parallel Fates, it does have that random component, which is going to make it difficult to trigger consistently. Now, depending on the campaign, special tokens don't appear all that often. There aren't that many of them in the deck. In the Chaos Bag at the beginning of campaigns, you tend to add more as you go along. So I think this card is going to be stronger at the beginning of a campaign when you've got fewer encounter cards to deal with, rather than later in a campaign as you add those cultist, tablet, and elder as skulls and elder things to the Chaos Bag. This card becomes a little bit less reliable. But man, I think if you can get this in your hand first turn, this makes a very solid opening play to get control of the encounter deck before it has a chance to react. Because what I could see happening, my fear playing Gloria is, say I get a bad hand, I don't get the assets I need, either assets to deal with enemies or assets to control the encounter deck, and I'm unable to get control of the encounter deck before that first opening draw, and then that opening draw basically levels you and you're unable to get out from underneath it and recover. That would be my biggest fear. This is obviously not a big deal in multiplayer because you've got friends around to help you. But if you're playing solo and you just get the wrong encounter card draw right off the bat, Gloria could be in deep trouble, especially if she draws an enemy, because she's not going to be able to deal with it without her assets or events like Spectral Razor. And if she's not able to deal with it, then she's going to be attacked. And even if you were to draw one of the assets that you needed, you've still got to play it, which means you're going to be taking an attack of opportunity, and it just spirals downward from there. So not a good situation to be in. And I think this card will be very helpful to avoiding those first turn issues. If you can play this and avoid one of the special tokens, you'll know what you're drawing for the next 4 Mythos phases, and that should give you enough time to get your other encounter deck control, like Alyssa Graham, online, and then you should be able to lock down the encounter deck from there. So I sat down, and of course we don't know Gloria's deck building restrictions. So I sat down and I put together what I sort of think a Gloria deck will look like. I'm sure that there will be many changes to this deck as I have more time to think about it and play with Gloria. But I threw in 2 copies of Scroll of Secrets, 2 copies of Scrying, 2 copies of Shriveling. St. Hubert's Key seems like an obvious choice for Gloria because you've got it gives her +1 willpower and +1 intellect, so you can be rocking. She can be a 6/6 if you get the key and Alyssa on the table. And it also sort of opens up the potential to play a Desperate Gloria build, because if you play 2 copies of Arcane Research, she starts with 2 mental trauma, and then St. Hubert's Key gives her -2 sanity, so she would be down to 7 and 5. So you'd only need to take a couple of horror before Gloria would have her desperate skills turned on. So that is definitely an option, I think, for Gloria builds if somebody wants to explore that. I included the new robes of Endless Night, both for their cost reduction as well as the two health they come with. Gloria definitely needs that. Alyssa Graham, of course, Arcane Research, and then the events package. I went with Deny Existence, Drawn to the Flame for those locations that if you need to grab 2 clues, or if you the shroud value is simply too high for Gloria to do it with a. If her intellect is 5 or 6 and she's or just still stuck at 4 and she can't grab the clues, Drawn to the Flame is there. We've got Ethereal Form to help us escape enemies. We've got Parallel Fates for that early encounter deck control, if we can get that going. And Spectral Razor can help us take down enemies with, I believe it's 3 health. So that is a nice event to have in case you get an unlucky encounter deck draw that you're unable to deal with. And Voice of Ra, which came out in the Jacqueline Fine starter deck to generate some resources. That has the potential to generate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 resources, I believe it is, if you pull the right tokens. So that is a huge benefit for Gloria. It's entirely possible I might need to include more resource generation in this deck. And finally, we've got Ward of Protection. Now, you might be able to get away without Ward in a Gloria build, simply because if you're able to get good control over the encounter deck, you shouldn't need to ward anything. But I feel like it's better to be safe than sorry, especially if you're dealing with combat and agility treacheries that you can't deal with. Finally, in the skill slots, we've got Enraptured and Unexpected Courage. So we've got Alyssa Graham scrying Scroll of Secrets and Parallel Fates for our encounter deck control, Shriveling Ethereal Form and Spectral Razor for enemy management, St. Hubert's Key to boost her willpower and intellect, and Deny Existence, a Ward of Protection, and Robes of Endless Night for a little bit of protection, and especially Deny Existence. You can use that to deny damage that might otherwise hurt Gloria. Now, the deck that I'm going to play through Threads of Fate, I decided I was going to add some experience points because I wanted to test Scrying 3, and I wanted to be able to play with both Alyssa and Ruth without having to worry about ally slots. So I did include 5 experience points worth of cards. I basically just upgraded Scrying to level 3 and included a charisma. Now, there were a lot of other options I could have gone. I was trying to get up to 9 experience points in the deck, but I just simply couldn't decide what I wanted to spend that experience points on. Upgrading Robes of Night seemed like a good idea. Of course, 4 of Cups from the Circle Undone would always be, you could boost Gloria's willpower that much higher. Of course, you've got cards like Deny Existence 5 if you're willing to really pack in the experience points. We don't have an upgrade for Alyssa, but perhaps we will see one. Perhaps we'll see a new Alyssa in the upcoming Innsmouth Conspiracy cycle. Because we've got Gloria now, so perhaps a new Alyssa, upgraded Alyssa, would be a nice pickup for her. So that is going to do it for my look at Gloria Goldberg. Man, this went on a lot longer than I suspected, but yeah, Gloria is. I always sort of suspected Gloria would be the encounter deck control mystic, and sure enough. Designer Matt Newman does not disappoint. I'm very optimistic about Gloria's chances. I think in multiplayer she will definitely have enough. I think she's got enough encounter deck control tools already that she could spend most of her time just manipulating the encounter deck to make the game much easier for the other investigators at the table. And when she's not doing that, she certainly has the intellect to pick up a few clues, or the willpower in order to take out a few enemies if necessary. So depending on what your group needs, Gloria can certainly fill either of those slots quite easily, and perhaps even more easily if she does have some sort of seeker element to her. In solo play, I'm, of course, always concerned. I have no problem with 5 willpower and 4 intellect, but the low combat and agility are a big concern. I think she has a lot more tools than Seekers do, for the most part, to deal with those low ability scores. But of course, Mystics tend to be a little slow as it is, and I'm a little bit worried about whether Gloria will have the speed, because she is, again, she is a Mystic. She needs to get other cards down in order to enable her abilities, both to leverage that 5 willpower and to use her encounter deck control mechanics. So she's going to take some time to get set up, and I think the game is going to hinge on whether you're able to get her set up fast enough to get control of the encounter deck before it steamrolls you. I think if you get a good start and you're able to get control, I think Gloria will do extremely well. If an enemy or two slips through and you're not ready for it, that could be bad. But as I said, I think she's in a better position than Seekers were, certainly before the recent Harvey Walters starter deck gave Seekers a few more options for enemy management. The Seekers were in a pretty dire strait there for a while. If you're playing solo, they just really don't have a lot of tools to help them deal with enemies. And the Harvey Walters starter deck has helped them in that regard. But I think Mystics are in a slightly better position. Again, it all boils down to speed, and I think Mystics, like Gloria, are going to be a little slower, and she's going to need... perhaps packing Scroll of Prophecies will be necessary. I guess the other thing that's going to slow her down is that cards like Scrying, until she can upgrade it, and Scroll of Secrets require actions. So not only do you require actions to get cards like Shriveling Down on the table and Alyssa Graham, but you're going to be needing to take extra actions to control the encounter deck. So between that and actions just to get your assets down, you're going to be using a lot of actions early to try to get set up. And so you're not necessarily going to be able to burst out of the gate and investigate a bunch of locations early if you want to take your time and get good control over the encounter deck, or as good a control as you can, and then go from there. So, but we shall see. We shall find out. We are going to play Threads of Fate with a Gloria Goldberg deck, and we shall see how she does. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope that you will join me in part 2 of this look at our new Mystic Investigator, Gloria Goldberg, the writer from the Dark Revelations novella. That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromleng@gmail.com. I am also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your other sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.